let me ask you this question. Can anybody get into this who's motivated and succeed?
1,000%. And it sounds cliche because when I was a contractor, built homes for 10 years. I looked at the guys that I did projects for. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then something happened to me that forced me to do it. And I'm like, holy shit, why wasn't I doing this the whole time?
So why would someone, I want to stay with this because I think it's really interesting.
I think it's the most important thing that your audience could know.
Right.
Honestly.
Because I have people personal in my life to me that are very important to me that are looking for a career, right? And they're young and they don't want me to help them directly because whatever, they're in the family, right?
Right. I was just going to say it's got to be a family member.
And I recommended to them that they should go out and I said, I have a lot of friends making money and I gave them some leads in the area, but they never followed through. Now, I wonder, like, you know, from your perspective being in it, what is it that stops a person from following through? I don't want to mean like in inner game stuff. I'm talking about like, is there some part of this? Like okay, let's go through what are the different steps to flip a house. I mean, I could figure them out pretty quickly, but I want you to say, what are like the 5 steps to succeeding in flipping houses?
Okay, so I'll answer your first question.
And is that the right term to say flipping houses, or is there a better way?
Because you can flip a house different ways, right? You can flip the contract and wholesale it. You can flip the contract and put it on the MLS. You can flip it however.
So flipping's a good term.
Yeah, it's great.
So what are the 5 steps to successfully flipping?
Okay, so first and foremost, the number one reason why people have a hard time getting into this business is for one reason. And the reason is that there are so many different ways to succeed that they get analysis paralysis, right? It's like you've got buddies that are like top realtors in the country.
Right.
Meanwhile, I would never get my real estate license, right? So when you get somebody like, let's say it's a nephew or somebody that looks at these 2 avatars and goes, this guy's got his license, this guy would never get his license, it confuses people.
Got it.
Okay, so that's number one. Now the 5 steps. Number 1, first step, find a seller. That's it. It's like when you were selling meat door to door.
Right.
You got to go to a door.
Right.
Right? You got to go to the door. So for us, the magic thing is that there's software available that will tell you exactly where these houses are.
Okay.
Okay. So
it scrapes the whole whatever listings are, tax rolls. There's anyone who might be in trouble and somebody distressed seller. It locates potentially distressed sellers.
Right. So I'll give you a really specific example for people that are brand new. So a really good app that we use, there's one called Batch Driven. Okay, so it batches all the houses together and you go drive and you stop by these houses. The app then has the seller's phone number, when they bought the house, how much they owe, what their daughter's name is, what they had for breakfast yesterday. The data in this day and age is insane. It's insane.
Right.
So that's step 1. Go download Batch Driven. I don't have an affiliate for it, but Batch Driven is a really, really good product.
Okay.
Okay. Now what it'll do, it's like Pokemon Go for real estate. Open up your app, and all of a sudden it's telling you where all the distressed sellers are.
Okay.
Jordan, I'm telling you, it's that easy.
Great.
Okay.
Step 1. So now you have potential pools.
So the app will tell you, or there's other apps too, who's in foreclosure, who's underwater, who's behind on their payments, who's getting a divorce. All of, even vacant homes. It'll tell you all of that stuff, and it'll have different color codes per house.
Got it.
Now what do you do, right? So think about this. This is like going back to your days of selling meat. So if you had an app that said, these guys have empty refrigerators.
Right. That'll be a good thing. Yeah.
Bro, think about that. You wouldn't have had to knock all those doors.
Right.
Meanwhile, you're cold calling and doing all this stuff. Technology has advanced that so much that instead of you knocking 10 doors in a row, you knock the one that you know has an empty freezer. That's it. That's how easy this has become.
Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2?
Step 1 is identify how you can solve the seller's problem.
Okay,
so if they're on this map, they have a problem. Empty freezer is the equivalent of it, but a problem could be I'm behind on my payments, I lost my job, I got a divorce. There's literally 50 plus reasons why a seller needs you. Okay. And people ask all the time, and I'll get to steps 3, 4, and 5. People ask all the time, why would a seller sell to you at a discount? Well, because they're in a painful situation, right? They can't make their payments. They need whatever remaining equity of their house, whatever. Okay. So what I love, and I'll get into some of the things that I do. So step 1, find the distress. Step 2, find out how you can help that seller, whether it's, I have a seller, for example, in Arizona. She loses her job, COVID. She's a school teacher.
Right.
She doesn't get her pension. And she's struggling to make her payments.
Okay.
Her son in Indiana says, hey, Mom, if you can sell your house, You can come and nanny for me and the kids. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'll go work for my son. This will be great. I'll be, connected with my family. She had no equity in her house. So if she tries to sell her house for $300, but she owes $290, is she going to make any money in her pocket?
Right.
Hell no.
Right.
Right. So figuring out that problem is step number 2. Okay. Number 3 is now, what category of real estate tactic do you utilize?
Stop 1 second. So how many different types of problems are there that are the ones that you can see every day and solve?
You can write a book on the same 50.
Okay, got
It's the same 50
So
over
there's
and over
50
and over.
potential scenarios.
Right.
And how many of those are solvable? Are they all solvable, or what percentage is solvable?
They're 100% solvable.
Okay, so there's 50 things. So there's sort of these 50 strategies. You plug in the this, that, boom, that's the strategy, get them out. Right?
They're 100% solvable, and here's how. So you talk to a lot of wholesalers. You've had a ton of great wholesalers on this podcast.
Right.
Like I said, I'm a big fan. The wholesalers can't solve all those problems. Okay, because a wholesaler looks at a $300,000 house, and what do they say if somebody doesn't have equity? They can't do anything with that. There's no skin on the bone for them.
Unless the bank will take a short sale, in which case they probably go to court and forfeiture, right?
Right, and even in a short sale situation, the wholesaler is going to have a hard time buying it themselves, because now there's regulation involved with you buying a short sale that you're involved in. There's a lot of people that went to prison over it. It's a crazy situation.
Why? Because they make promises to the people and stuff.
No, because essentially what they're doing is they're going to the bank and they're defrauding the bank and saying, hey, I have a buyer at 200. It's the highest offer I got. Meanwhile, they're the only buyer that they even represented, right? They never sent it out to anybody else.
Sure.
And so they were keeping it in-house and not actually public. You know what I'm saying?
So you'd have to disclose that to the bank. Say, I'm the only buyer, it's me. And then if the bank did it, you'd be off the hook, right?
Right. So now you identify the problem, and you identify, does the seller have equity? If the seller has equity, typically what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to wholesale it to a fix and flipper. That's if you're brand new. If you're brand new, wholesale is probably the easiest way, because you don't have to do B, which is fix and flip it yourself.
And how much was the mark on the tip? What's the typical price house? 150.
So
200?
in Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I primarily invest, most of the stuff I invest outside of the state are buy and holds. Mm-hmm. But Arizona, the average purchase price is about $300,000.
Okay, and if you're going to purchase it at 300, you're going to want to wholesale it back out at.
Well, if the house is worth 300 after it's renovated and all that kind of stuff, that means you got to buy that at like 180 to 210.
So the house is actually worth 300 on the way out.
Right.
That means you have to buy it about 180. So then you mark it up to what?
Maybe 200.
So you make 20,000 and give it to the fix and flipper.
You're done. You're in and out. Your name's not even on the HUD. Like, it's that simple. You're not even involved in the transaction. You just get a check at title.
And how easy is it? And I guess easy is probably wrong. So, like, in other words, I would assume it's a pretty competitive market, right?
Anywhere that you can make $20,000 per house with no credit,
right?
Very little money into the game. It's ultra competitive.
But is it possible for a new person to break into it?
Incredibly possible.
Okay, great.
Incredibly possible. So
so you said it's like 100%. So I mean, like, anyone that really tries eventually can break into it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Okay. I mean, some of the guys in the industry that have been around for a long time, I interview them all the time, and it took them 2-3 months to get their first deal, but boom, you get a $20,000 deal. And now that paradigm shifts where you're like, this is possible. I can truly do this. And everything changes. Now it's like contract per week, right? It's just like you selling meat. The first time you sold meat, you're like, holy shit, I can do this.
Sure.
Boom, paradigm shifts, you go crush it, right?
Got it.
So now let's say that I've got to buy that house at $200,000.
Right.
Okay. What if the seller owes $290 on their mortgage? Mm-hmm. Can a wholesaler solve that seller's problem?
One would think the bank would have to somehow be involved in it, right?
Or you can simply do an assumption. You can take over those payments, or you can do what I talk about a lot, which is called subject to. So I take over the mortgage subject to the existing loan. So I keep the loan in place, but I take and put the deed in my name. And what do I do with the property? I turn around and rent it out. So I'm leveraging existing debt, right, at 2%, 3%, and then I go turn around and rent it, Airbnb it, corporate rental, whatever my exit strategy may be.
Okay, so in that case, that wouldn't be a fix and flip.
Nope, that would be option 3. So option 1 is wholesale the contract. Option 2, still kind of in line with option 1. There's got to be enough equity for me to take it down myself, right? Go get a hard money loan. Again, talking to a listener that's never done this before, it's daunting to think, shit, I got to go fix and flip a house. Where am I going to get the money? Even at our level, right, we have a ton of cash. We do a ton of deals. We don't even use our own money to fix and flip properties. Still, to this day, I purchase the house with hard money.
Right.
I renovate the house with private money.
Got it.
Okay. So private money lender comes in, they give me 20, 30 for the renovation. I'm in that deal, $0. My wife puts it on the market. I flip that house, no money out of my pocket.
And why do you do that? So is this because you want to do it with many, many houses and you don't have enough capital to?
No, it goes back to REI, replace expenses with income. So if let's say we just did a deal, we made $125,000 in January. Okay. I can take that $125,000 net that we just made on a fix and flip and reinvest that into my fix and flip business. Or JB, I can take that $125,000 and go buy another title company. So what I would rather do is
you see a better uses for the capital.
And the reality is when you go and fix and flip a property, let's say $300,000 price point, you go get a lender such as, you probably have loaned money to people multiple times, private lenders, hard money lenders, whatever. The total cost of that on a fix and flip is like $4,000 or $5,000. So if I'm making $30,000 to $50,000 myself in my pocket, wouldn't it be just perfectly fine to give some lender $4,000 on the deal for me to not have any exposure capital wise? Then my capital is over here working on buying a new title company or building up a virtual assistant business or whatever it may be.
Okay. What interest do they charge the hard money? 15%?
15% is kind of, you're brand new, you're going to be at 15 to 18%.
And how many points up front?
No points in Arizona.
Okay.
If somebody charges me points in Arizona, I know they're from California.
Got it. Okay.
It's a California thing, is that they'll charge you a point, maybe 2 up front, and then they'll charge you their interest, right? So for us in Arizona, we pay 0 points.
Okay.
And the lender will typically, when you have a good relationship with them, it's 10% interest on your flip.
Got it.
And I can get 100% financing on the purchase. So let's say I contract with the seller at 210.
Right.
My lender will give me not just 210, but they'll actually give me 210 plus my closing costs. So they'll bring $213,000 to the closing table.
Got it.
I literally bought that house with no money out of my pocket.
Got it.
Now, JB, how do I go fix and flip that property? Now I don't have any money for renovation. Well,
private lender you go to.
Private lender.
Right.
Daddy Warbucks or people that come to us. We have nurses, doctors, engineers, all these people go, I need a place to place my money.
Okay.
Right. And we pay them because they're in second position now, right? We have a first position loan. This is getting into the weeds, everybody.
No, you have the hard money lenders in first position.
Boom. And then I got a second loan.
Private person's in second position. Right?
So if you're in second position, JB, wouldn't you want a higher interest rate?
I mean, it depends on what the first position. Yeah, it would, but in other words, it seems to me like there's enough equity to secure everybody here, right?
Yes, there is, right? Especially on a fix and flip. So second position lender typically gets 12 to 14%.
Okay.
No points.
Got it.
Okay. And then we take that money, we go and fix and flip, sell it on the market. My wife is our realtor, so she lists the property for $1,000. So she gets $1,000 and we save money. And I'm into the property, no money out of my pocket. Meanwhile, my capital goes and gets built out somewhere else.
Right.
Whether it's buying Bitcoin or doing whatever the hell you want, you let your capital go work somewhere else.
Okay. And is that like a hard and fast rule that always you're not putting any capital in? Or are there some people that say, I don't really want to give away money to the hard lenders always. I'd like to have my own pool of.
Yes.
Is anyone doing that?
A lot of people. In fact, I just got a text from my bookkeeper, Tony. She says, hey, your lender's supposed to wire $35,000 on a deal. They haven't. Can I just take it out of one of the company accounts? I go, sure. Right. There's timing things where, just use our money. It's no big deal.
Got it.
But there's other people that are very risk adverse and they also don't want to borrow money from people, right? Borrowing money from people is an icky word. And so they'll go, again, it's a personality type.
Sure.
I don't want that. And so they'll go and try and fund all these fix and flips themselves, which works, but it stunts your growth. Bro. So, are you the guy that wants to go fast and scale, or do you want to go slow and never have any risk?
All right. So now what step are we at now?
So let's go back to this. So we talked about
step 1, find the house. Step 2, right? Solve the problem.
Figure out what the problem is.
Right.
Step 3 is, which category can I move the seller into? Is it a cash transaction because there's enough equity? But what if there's not enough equity?
Right.
What if the total retail value on this house is $300,000 and the seller owes $290?
Right.
Wholesaler can't solve that problem.
Sure.
That's where a guy like me comes in. Okay. So I utilize creative finance, whether it's taking over their existing mortgage, giving them a little bit of cash and letting them move on. And I took over the debt.
So you took over $290,000 of debt on a property that's worth only $300,000.
Right.
So you're doing that because you believe the house is going to appreciate, or you can rent it out. What are you thinking?
Always cash flow, right?
Cash flow.
You never base anything on equity. I have a saying: equity comes, equity goes, but the cash will always flow.
Right.
Even back in 2008, when you talk to the guys that got their asses obliterated, it's because they were taking over. So the type of investing I do is called subject to investing, right?
Okay.
I'm buying something subject to an existing loan. There was guys that got beat to, like, they got the piss beat out of them in 2008. Why? It's because they were taking over adjustable rate mortgages. So in 2008, 2009, rates go up, they no longer cash flow. So I'm taking over fixed 2%, 3% rates, right? And this works with anything. It works with mobile homes all the way up to, I just bought a $3 million home with no credit, no credentials. Credentials is like, I have to have a W-2. Right? When you go get a loan, they're like, show me your W-2, show me your tax returns.
Right.
How long's your job history? Where's your cash coming from?
Right.
The last 130 properties that we've bought didn't use a single ounce of credit or credentials.
Because you're not borrowing from the bank.
No,
Right.
No bank is involved. Either the seller is creating a note for us, right, in a seller finance situation, or B, we're just taking over an existing note.
Got it.
Right? So if a seller owes $290,
Doesn't the bank have to approve you assuming a mortgage?
not even close. No.
So the
And
seller,
we're not assuming a mortgage. This is where it gets really tricky. You can assume mortgages. I don't assume mortgages. The seller, this is where it gets tricky. Seller's name stays on the mortgage.
Right. So they're still on the hook, though.
They're still on the hook.
Okay.
Okay. They're still on the hook. So we protect
But
them.
you're going to make the payments, though. You say the pitch is you're going to be on the loan, but I'm going to make the payments.
Right.
And if I don't make the payments, you get the property back. Basically.
Right. There you go. So what we do is we'll write like a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And let's say that I get abducted by aliens.
Right.
I'm no longer even on the planet.
Right.
What happens to that house?
It goes back to the seller, right?
Right. And here's a couple of benefits. And I tell sellers, I go, let me tell you something. If the property, let's say I default or I get abducted by aliens, what happens? And they go, I don't know. That's a great question. I go, it's the best thing that could happen to you. Because now I've caught up your late payments.
Right. And you got the house back.
I've
right?
cleaned up
You
the
want me to
property.
default, sure. I get it.
Right. And now the house is amortized and I put some cash in your pocket. Okay. Now you get the house back.
So where are we in the steps?
So we're on step 3.
Okay.
Have I determined how I can solve that seller's
Okay, so
problem?
let's say you can.
Yeah.
Can you always, or most percentage?
I have never ran into a seller that we can't solve the problem. It comes down to 2 things, though. It comes down to timing and consistently following up.
Okay.
Okay, because sometimes you'll run into a seller who says, I need to move to grandma's house.
Right.
But grandma doesn't have an extra room for me for 2 months. Okay, well, that's a timeline issue. I got to consistently follow up with that seller, because guess who else is following up with that seller?
Other people. Yeah.
Other people.
Sure.
Right? So that's where people fail in this business, is that they call the seller one time
Sure.
and they stop. And they go, oh, the seller is going to call me back.
Right.
I just straight out tell the seller, I go, look, I'm a sales guy, so I'm going to follow up with you, right? Full transparency. I'm a sales guy. Whether you want me to follow up with you, I'm going to. So let's just put a time frame, 3 weeks. Great. I'll call you in 2 weeks and 6 days. Right? So you just let them know you're going to continue to follow up with them and that you're here to solve their problem.
All right. So at what point now? So I'm still trying to figure out what is it that is stopping average people from doing this. Where's step 4 is what? Where you actually convince them to sell, or
Step 4 is you work out an agreement.
Structure an agreement.
You structure an agreement. You put together a contract and you go open escrow.
And step 5?
Step 5 is you have your exit strategy.
So you exit, you flip it, or you rent it out, or
Yeah.
Airbnb it. Right?
My primary thing right now is Airbnb, right? Because it requires less headaches with tenants and all that kind of stuff, and your cash flow is way higher. Okay. But
And you have a management company that manages the property for you.
right, there's properties that I'll buy. Like I just bought one in Dallas. The seller sold it to us on seller finance. He says, I have a specific number and nobody can come to. I go, I'll give you that number if you give me 2% interest and you create a note for 30 years. Seller does that. I give him $5,000 for $500,000. I think it was about $500,000. Noah, my Airbnb manager, flies in, sets up the house, sends me a picture of him naked in the hot tub and says, hey, house is set up, let's go. And then I get a check every month. That's it. That's all there is to it. I don't have to deal with the furniture setup. I don't have to deal with the Airbnb account. Somebody else does all that.